Hey everybody, Nick here, and I got a review for you today of the Spyderco Kiwi 4. Now, the Spyderco Kiwi line historically has been slip joint style knives, but for the 4 they actually gave it a backlock, which is a beautiful thing. I've looked at these for a while because I like Spyderco, I like small knives, and I like Wharncliffe blades. And so I figured, you know what, I'm going to finally try one of these guys out. And so let's go ahead and talk about it. The good, the bad, and the ugly, as always. First and foremost, the good. This is a Wharncliffe blade, and I do like Wharncliffes for a lot of EDC kind of tasks. They allow you to do sorts of cuts that are very, very nice and very, very handy for things, and they're fine for a lot of other tasks. They're not great for food prep, but, hey, whatever. So the Wharncliffe blade is a beautiful thing, and the knife itself is built very solidly. The backlock feels very solid, and, I got no feeling like I'm going to snap this thing off in any way, shape, or form. It's got the wire clip, which is, as I've said many times, my favorite clip from Spyderco by far. And it's nice in that way. It does offer you finger choil up here, which is good. And so this is not a knife that's going to pop out of your hands while you're using it. It's got a lot of good places to pinch on it, which is kind of a wonderful thing. It's got a decent enough steel. It's VG10 steel. It's a very strong and very solid backlock. No lock rock, no nothing there. It locks up very, very nicely. And the other thing I'll point out is the fit and finish on the back of this is really impressive. I mean, look at this. This looks like one solid metal surface here. But in reality, there we go. That's your backlock. That's a really, really nicely finished backlock, and probably one of the nicest I've ever seen. So this particular one came off the line in Japan. Very, very nice. And also, I'll say that this carries really, really small. I mean, compared to your Delica, for instance, which is already a fairly lightweight knife, this is much, much smaller in the pocket. And because it's deep carry and it's very vertical, you can put this in your pocket and basically forget it. You've got it in your pocket, but it's still hanging there and accessible. So that's probably the very best thing about this knife. I mean, it's solid. It's got a good blade shape, good clip, but it just disappears in the pocket. And so you get a knife that you're basically not paying for at all in terms of weight and carrying. It's very light. It's very nice in that way. So there's your good. Let's jump on into the bad. Couple of bad things here. First and foremost, this in the hand is just not a gem for me because, I got a great grip here and I'm okay here. But in the back here, this is just kind of rocking around. And if I really want to grip on it and bear down, it digs into the hand pretty effectively. So maybe this would actually work better for somebody with larger hands. But for me, at least, it's just not an ergonomic gem. And that's a little disappointing because it looks like it really should be. A couple of other issues with it. I'm not a big fan of the choice of the angle on the blade here. Given that you've got your fingers in here, it's very, very hard to cut into a surface and still hit there. I'm going to use my razor as a flat surface here. It's very, very hard to cut into something without having to do like a pull cut. Part of that's just the Wharncliffe blade, but the angle of the blade being so far that direction makes it not an ideal cutter in a lot of ways, and so that was a little bit frustrating. A couple of other fit and finish kinds of issues. The G10 on this is very abrasive, which means it'll stay in your pocket, but it's also going to be a little bit of a pocket destroyer for you, which is something to keep in mind. A lot of the surfaces aren't super well chamfered, although it's not as bad as some of your Taichung Spydercos. And it does need some jimping, because I talked about how much I like the flushness here, but your hand slips around a great deal, so I would have preferred some jimping in here as well as in here, really to grab onto you a little more. I wish there was a sharpening choil, but that's a common wish I have on Spydercos. The pivot screws actually stick way out on this knife, which is pretty... I mean, I can kind of get it, but they could have milled out the G10 a little bit and made that a little bit less apparent, which is less than ideal. And then finally, there's a very poor blade-to-handle ratio. I mean, if you look at it, because the choil is a part of it, the actual blade of this knife takes up this much of the knife, and the rest of this is all handle and choil. This is a really common thing with Spydercos, particularly the ones trying to be ergonomic, but that's kind of an issue. This is a very long knife relative to the amount of blade that you get. So there's your bad. A couple of fit and finish issues. It's just not great to cut with, given the fact that your hands are there. And, Yeah, so let's jump on into the ugly. Ugly, here are two things. First, I feel like the blade is a little bit too long. And that's kind of a strange thing to say, considering I've just been knocking it for having too little blade to handle ratio. But I do wish that this knife was actually a little bit smaller, like they'd cut it off here and had a slightly shorter blade, because a Wharncliffe blade that's this long is just a little awkward to me. I mean, I'm fine with long Warnies, but with this angle and whatnot, this would be a much more comfortable knife to use if the blade was about here. It's only it's a little less than 3 inches, but I wish they'd gone 275 on this. I would feel a little better about it, just overall. And it's also a little too thin to be so long, and that's the ergonomic issue. This is a very thin knife in the hand, so it's not ideal there. And then finally, the big ugly thing is that this is 120 bucks, and 120 bucks buys you a whole lot of Spyderco. So unless you really need this particular blade shape, you're not getting great value. I mean, you've got your native 5 here, which is 90 bucks and is an incredible value, or your Delica, which is 60 bucks and is an incredible value, and both of these cut a lot better than your Kiwi. So I know they got to make up for low volume with higher prices, but I don't know about that. So anyways, what's the verdict on the Kiwi here? Honestly, my final conclusion on the Spyderco Kiwi is that it just left me cold. Because it's a little too thin to be as long as it is in the blade length, and the blade length is a little too long anyways for what you're getting here. The ergonomics aren't just quite right, and for 120 bucks, I'm honestly just not seeing it. If I want something that's this lightweight and easy to carry, I would probably go UKPK, because it's in the very similar area, but the ergonomics are better, and it's just better for cutting. The steel is slightly better here, but, who knows? And, I don't know. On the whole, if I want just another knife, it's not all that much smaller, for instance, than your tie lock when folded. And, given that's a much bigger knife, but still, you're losing a whole lot for this very small size. So it's a shame, and I'm disappointed because I've wanted a Kiwi for a while, but now that I got one, I realize it's a rare miss. And so, such is life. I can't say I recommend the Kiwi. It's interesting, and if you love the blade shape, or if you need this very specific blade shape in a small, lightweight package, maybe it works for you, but it sure didn't for me. And I guess that's where I'll end. I hope this has been helpful, and have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day.